and welcome to the East3ROUTE Initiative Investment Seminar 2014. My name is Nozi Pombanjo, representing CNBC Africa. Now, my esteemed panel of guests this afternoon have the task of interrogating the policy environment that is supposed to create a conducive environment to sustain and attract investment into this initiative. Now, we know that the initiative was crafted, and the vision behind that initiative was crafted as early as 1998 and has been steadily cemented in the last 16 years. However, what we also know is that in the absence of a fertile environment, fertile to attract investment, fertile to sustain investment, and of course, fertile to grow investment, that vision remains exactly that. And it was this in mind that I am honored to introduce my panels today. Sitting immediately next to me is our host from South Africa, that is the MEC for Economic Development, Tourism and Environmental Affairs from KwaZulu-Natal, Mr. Michael Mabuya-Kulu. Thank you for hosting us and welcome to this panel. And representing Swaziland, we have the Honorable Minister of Commerce, Industry and Trade, and that is Minister Gideon Dlamini. My second chair is the Minister of Environmental Affairs and Tourism, and that's Minister Jabulani Mabuza. Of course, next to the Swaziland delegates, we have our representation from Mozambique, that is the CEO of the Mozambique Tourism Authority. And finally, from the Seychelles, we have from the Board of Directors responsible for Africa and the Americas, Mr. David Germain. Gentlemen, thank you for making the time to join us today. And maybe, MEC, let's start off by putting you in the hot seat and ask you the question, what value can be quantified as been unlocked from this initiative since 1998? Put simply, what success can you speak of over the last 16 years?
Well, thank you to you and also to my fellow panelists, the honorable ministers from the Kingdom of Swaziland, the CEO from tourism from Mozambique, as well as the executive director from Seychelles. First and foremost, we can say that when our heads of state, the then President Nelson Mandela, as well as the then President Chisano, as well as His Majesty the King, Mswati III of Swaziland, agreed in 1998 that there was a need to be able to talk about economic development of these countries and focusing primarily on tourism as a lead sector for growth, we can safely say that we have seen a phenomenal growth in the last 16 to 20 years. Let me sketch a scenario. We all know that if you look into Mozambique, for instance, during those days, we were able to see the investment of the Mozam into Mozambique. And for us, which is part of BHP Bulletin, it was a big step. We can also say that from the infrastructure from point of view, we're able to see the building of the N4, a point made by Ambassador Faisal Ismail earlier, and through the Lubombo Special Initiative, and that actually was a phenomenal growth. But over and above that, we can safely say that we're seeing development in Swaziland in terms of infrastructure when we talk about the building of the new airport KM3. And to us, it tells you that on the KwaZulu-Natal side, we have seen the building of a new road up to Kosi Bay. But over and above that, we have a huge investment in terms of tourism, as well as the small businesses that have actually been growing in the Smangaliso Wetland Park, which have now grown more than 80%. So what is this all about? It is about three countries collaborating, working together, and opening investment opportunities, but also governments taking a lead, because we must emphasize at the outset that governments have four responsibilities in the economy. It is a facilitator, it must facilitate development. It is an enabler, it must enable private sector initiatives and projects. It is a catalyst, it must catalyze other initiatives. And the last part is that it must intervene. It can intervene in two ways. It can intervene in terms of setting up acceptable, well-balanced regulatory frameworks, but it also uses the public fiscus in terms of mobilizing it into spending it in a manner, for instance, in infrastructure that create both the pull and the push factors for the private sector.
Minister Mabuza, let's pick up on some of the comments that the MEC has made, and in particular, he speaks of a phenomenal growth and highlights your market in particular in Swaziland. Share some of those numbers with us. Let's quantify the success that we speak of. But over and above that, Minister, we understand that at the very core of this initiative, it's not just about tourism, it's also about broader economic development. If you have realized such development, please share with us.
Thank you. Let me start by saying a warm welcome. We are appreciating a warm welcome that we got from the reception when we get to the South African side. And I believe it is through Minister Mike Mabuya-Kulu, and thank you very much for that. And His Majesty and Indlovukazi and the whole government of Swaziland, it's supporting this initiative of the East3ROUTE fully. And indeed, like as Minister has mentioned, it is a very good initiative. We've seen a lot of it. He has already mentioned the development, actually the international airport that we have now in the country, King Mswati, the third international airport. It's a very good airport, which I believe when we leave South Africa, we will have an opportunity to even pass by that airport so that you can see. Our belief is that it is a result of this initiative of the East3ROUTE. And again, maybe to mention something else, we are putting up now in Swaziland a new convention center, and which we believe as well it is a product of the initiative, because we believe when this convention center is finished, we will now have big events that can be hosted in the country of Swaziland. So we really believe it is doing well for us. And again, there is something that these countries are planning to put up, obviously with the support of KZN, an East3ROUTE legacy project, which will soon commence at Lavomisa on the Swaziland side. But it is a project that is for the East3ROUTE.
Very briefly, Minister, if you can just give us a quick snapshot. When we talk about a legacy project, practically what are we talking about?
It's a community project that will be developed in Lavomisa, whereby there will be a sign that says East3ROUTE. And so that when people get into the country or they come to South Africa, they will see that it is a result of this initiative. So it's a project for developing the community of Lavomisa.
And we'll come back to how we empower those communities to actually have a claim and stake in the tourism that happens in and around their communities. But Minister, we're sitting, Minister Dlamini, with your portfolio. You're looking at commerce, you're looking at trade, you're looking at investment opportunities. Maybe let's talk about that. What have been the most notable trade patterns that have emerged as a result of this particular initiative? Have we seen a growth in the trade between the countries? And where we haven't seen growth, what do you think needs to be done to unlock it?
Thank you very much, Nozipo. Perhaps also thank you, Your Excellency Mabuya-Kulu, and your whole team, and the lovely people of South Africa. And also to my colleagues, distinguished colleagues from Seychelles and Mozambique. And also, maybe while still at that, congratulate our neighbor Mozambique for the successful elections that they have just held, which from where we were sitting, they look very peaceful. And we wish you well in terms of the next 4 or 5 years to come in terms of the new government. Yes, indeed, a lot of what has been mentioned already is part of the developments, but as well, it's a planning process for the years that have passed in terms of what can be achieved through this collaboration, because what is happening now, as we all know, is regional integration and up to continental integration, and that if we are united at the level of the sub-regional or even through East3ROUTE, then we can be a stronger bloc to challenge the rest of the world, because they will soon be challenging us. So we need to be ahead and start working in the way that we're working now. Just on the Swaziland side, we are having an investor roadmap that has already been developed and commissioned that will eliminate all obstacles to trade and investment. So the positions that we see today as being where we sit will change very soon, so that we are creating a Swaziland that is a natural destination for investment. But also we have a roadmap in terms of developing the country development program for the next 5 to 7, 8 years, under which we have identified the East3ROUTE as one of the very strategic areas, given that we are sitting on a very important opportunity in terms that we share culture, we share language, we almost share very social, like it has been said, that the social cohesion is also a very important factor. So we are already working in terms of the culture side, for example, through our cultural exchanges, we are working together. But we've also developed the infrastructure in terms of road. From Lavumisa is a wonderful drive, and I would like to invite anybody who has not been to Swaziland to take that lovely drive. It's quite refreshing. And of course, the airports have been mentioned, but as well, we are also upgrading the rail infrastructure. It's at an advanced stage right now, but as well, on the Lavumisa platform, we are developing Lavumisa into an industrial zone.
Right.
Which means at that level, we are already both an industrial and tourism zone. So, which means soon we will be seeing a different level.
Minister, I want to prompt you on the point that you've made about how you have identified the East3ROUTE initiative as part and parcel of your investment roadmap. I'd like to have a conversation with you 2 years from now to reflect back on the numbers I'm going to ask you now. What are your targets? I want to be able to sit and say, this is what you said in Durban, and this is how you've performed. Talk to us about the 3 most important investment targets for this initiative.
One of the key targets for us, like you saw on the chart, it's one of job creation. And we are targeting the East3ROUTE is already contributing quite significantly to job creation. And we are also seeing it as a very good fertile ground for more investment, so that our people can benefit in terms of jobs and also in terms of benefiting from the route itself, in terms of the integration in the sub-region, South Africa, Mozambique, and we also are developing the rail system as well that will both increase our economic growth rate and GDP, as well as make a very good lead in terms of eliminating, I would say, perhaps reducing the unemployment rate to bare minimum, because our key targets are really economic growth and as well as job creation at the moment. So our infrastructure and everything is targeted at that, but we have about 5 pillars under the program that we have.
So we have that on record, we have that on tape. I'll play that back to you hopefully in the next 2 or 3 years. Huan, let's move on to you. Mozambique, certainly top of the list on any investor's radar. We are seeing phenomenal growth coming from this particular market. But maybe let's come back and think about the incentives that you think the private sector wants to see from a policy perspective if we are to sustain the investment that we've seen into Mozambique. If there are pearls of wisdom that you think you could share with all the countries represented here, how do you ensure that you whet the appetite of international investors, but most importantly, that you keep it?
Thank you very much. Allow me also to thank Minister Mabuyakhulu for hosting us here, and the colleagues from KwaZulu-Natal. My thanks may be also to the honorable ministers from Swaziland. They have hosted as we were in transit yesterday, and we enjoyed the trip to come to KwaZulu-Natal. And for sure to say that, okay, my brother from Swaziland, you are welcome. Last year we had Yashirin, and this year we have you. This is really great. it shows that you are interested to be part of the family. We believe that there is incentives and elements that can be mentioned. We may take them quantitative and qualitative elements. We have seen that even those qualitative elements, such as institutional framework reinforcement, today we'll be signing, for instance, the Memorandum of Understanding. This is a product that can be shown as a result of East3ROUTE. We said that this is the fourth edition. It means that we have established some routes. Last year we went to Gaza province. This is one point of Mozambique. This year we are going to Nyambane. That will be the second one. Before Gaza, we went to Maputo. We can show you that, okay, we have positioned 3 destinations within the East3ROUTE. The other one that you cannot really measure are the contacts that are developed by those fellow brothers and sisters from the private and public sectors who are sitting on the other side. They may have communicating among each other, establish business ties and so on. And the result will be the one which was mentioned here: employment, poverty reductions, infrastructure, development, and so on and so forth.
I want to prod you on that memorandum of understanding that you've brought to our attention, and in particular, what is contained in that MOU that is not going to gather dust as a policy document, but will practically make some of the realities of the targets that have been spoken about here on the podium come to fruition? What will that document achieve?
Well, one of the points that can be mentioned is the command that you, South Africans, Mozambicans, Swazi and Seychelles, may make sure that the investment will be successful. This is one. The second one is to make sure that everyone who is in the East3ROUTE will contribute with human resource skills, okay, on that. The third one is to share the beauty and the costs. We have been doing this on ad hoc manner. Now we are saying that, okay, let us share the costs of these investments, because we see East3ROUTE is not expenditure to us, is an investment. The other thing that will be mentioned there is let us show the world that from small initiatives we can grow. We are also answering the bilateral and multilateral relationship among states, among countries, among regions. Those will be really achievements. And of course, as I said, the private sector will use those opportunities to raise the issues that they are facing, to contribute in order to see that as public servants,
Yes.
if we can take it and come with some solutions.
And we'll certainly come back to those public-private partnerships and what we need to do to make sure that they're effective and they work. But David, let me come to you first. Seychelles, a powerhouse when it comes to tourism brands. Why does it make sense for Seychelles to want to be a part of this initiative? What value that you don't already have are you hoping to unlock from this?
Well, first of all, good afternoon. I'd like to thank the Minister for his wonderful hospitality during our stay here. Also acknowledge the presence of the ministers from Swaziland and my friend from Mozambique as well, and good afternoon, everyone. Seychelles is a small group of islands in the Western Indian Ocean, 115 islands, totally dependent on tourism. It's our bread and butter, we call it. The program that we have in place is a strong sustainable tourism program, which comes with a lot of limitations. If you put our land and sea mass combined together, 50% of that is dedicated to conservation, which we virtually can't touch. It's either national parks or marine parks. So tourism, in a way, comes at a cost to us. And thus, our marketing strategy, for example, in countries like America, involves Africa a lot. We are already working with Africa. For example, visitors, Americans coming to Seychelles, 90% of Americans visiting Seychelles visit an African country first. We say to them, come and visit Africa in combination with the Seychelles, your safari and the beach combination. Now, the East3ROUTEs provide also opportunities on the same platform for Seychelles to work with the other countries that we're not working with at the moment. That's from a holiday package perspective. But this can also be extended to cruise ships, which visit Seychelles quite a lot as well, to include ports like Durban as well. We can be the convincing factor to convince these partners of ours that has been working with us for many years to include the other countries as well. I just want to mention as well the cost effectiveness of this initiative is the fact that, say, tomorrow I'm going to Russia and none of the partners are going. I carry the brochures with me at no cost to them and expose them wherever I am. Same applies if they're going to China. I'm not. And we carry all of us wherever one of us
There's
goes.
an economies of scale that
Absolutely.
you are leveraging. David, but you've raised a number of important points, two of them that I'm going to extract and use to drive the conversation forward. The one is the balance between driving tourism numbers whilst having a strong policy that is focused on conservation. And I'm going to bring that one to you, MEC. How have you juggled that particular act? But the second issue that you've raised, David, you made a statement and you said you are totally dependent, almost totally dependent on tourism. And I want to maybe bring the conversation and throw that point to Huan and say, let's draw from the Kenyan example. Let's see how terrorism in particular has almost decimated the numbers in the tourism sector. And ask you, Huan, to share with us, what are you proactively doing to insulate this particular sector from shocks of that nature? But while you think about that, MEC, let's come back to the juggling act. Tourism numbers and conservation in the same portfolio. How do you do it?
Well, I must say that for us, conservation and the ecosystem, particularly safari and the Big Five, are indeed the basis upon which we are able to attract more tourism numbers. Because what distinguishes a country in Africa from any other continent is that one of the biggest selling points is the issue of the Big Five. It is on that score that one of the common features of all of us here in the East3ROUTE, of course to a lesser extent for Seychelles, is that we do talk about ensuring that we do conserve that which we think is our heritage and African heritage, in particular the issues of preserving and protecting our rhinos, amongst other species, from being killed in the manner that they are, because they are the basis upon which we are able to grow numbers. And I think anyone who have read the numbers, even at the height of the international depression, South Africa continued, as well as the SADC, continued to attract more numbers. And one of the reasons is that people who want to come here, they want to actually see the safari experience. And indeed, it is in our collective interest that therefore we recognize that as the goose that lays the golden eggs.
Before we get back to you, Huan, maybe Minister Dlamini, let's get your response to that. When in your investment portfolio, you're sitting with investors and yet you have these environmental assessments that at times can be a stumbling block to investment because the conservation policy is just so strong. How do you iron out those differences? What are we saying to investors about the opportunities in this initiative? Because possibly we could be having very different conversations.
Thank you very much. First of all, in terms of I did say that the route, East3ROUTE, to come to it, that it is a very fertile environment also for conservation nature and as well as a tourism route, wildlife, and as well as a very fertile activity of agribusiness. So in that respect, we think that conservation and also access to land for business, for example, it's one of the critical areas that we have identified in terms of our investor roadmap, even though I must say it is not really a big challenge for us. It's a question of the processes getting around to decision making, and that is really a question of process management in terms of how do you eventually get around to taking that critical decision. It's not like someone or there is a policy that is frustrating. It's a process issue, and we've identified that. So sooner or later, we'll be riding quite smoothly.
So the systems and processes seem to iron out any of the dents that one might think appear when it comes to those two policy tensions. Huan, let's come back, and maybe let's also get Minister Mabuza to touch on the vulnerability of the tourism sector, in particular its vulnerability to brand perceptions. We've seen examples in the east of the continent. We've seen examples in the west of the continent. What lessons do you draw from the threats to tourism that we've seen in Kenya in particular, and what are you doing to ensure that you are insulated from any potential shocks of that nature?
Well, this is a challenge to all of us worldwide. You cannot succeed if you work alone. I believe that the case of Kenya's and even other areas has shown us that you need international corporations among those who are skilled experts on securities and so on. What we are doing is to strengthen the measures to be able to prevent. Is mainly preventive stuff. At the same time that we work with neighbors and other countries. This is the only way that you can prevent it.
On that note, it seems as if the three concepts that have come to the fore, conservation, investment, and tourism, all of them each mutually reinforcing. We're going to take a short break now, but when we come back, we continue our conversation with our panel, trying to unlock some of the policy tensions that might be taking away from continued and sustained investment into the East3ROUTE initiative. We'll see you right after this. Welcome back. You're still watching the East3ROUTE Investment Seminar 2014. Now, gentlemen, let's pick up on one of the conversations that have really captured the minds of the delegates earlier today. MEC, let's talk about infrastructure. Let's talk about the kind of investment that we need from the private sector, and what are you doing as the public service to get private investors to part with their dollars for this particular initiative?
Well, thank you very much. I think, Nozipo, one of the reasons why when we established the East3ROUTE, and the term and the name East represents exchange, adventure, scenic beauty, and the last part, trade. It has been an appreciation on our side that for us to be able to have the East3ROUTE to grow, in part, it has to focus on four things. It has to focus on promoting both inter and intra-tourism between the participating countries and member countries. The second part is that we have to have focus on infrastructural development which connect these countries. The third part is to promote trade in between the countries. And the last part is to ensure that you encourage both your cultural and heritage, but more community participation, so communities become beneficiaries out of the process. Otherwise, this will become an illusion, which is where the elite simply come around to make their own arrangement and therefore do it over the heads of the ordinary masses, and it will not succeed. It is on that score that when we structured today's investment seminar, in part we wanted to focus on infrastructure, primarily because for us, if we are going to increase investments and attract investment, the issue of infrastructure, both at the level of the public sector spending, but also in attracting private sector investment to augment what the public sector is doing. Because as we know, the fiscal framework following the 2008 economic depression is that it is constrained in all countries. And we can only therefore be able to do more if we invite private sector. Be it on a BOT arrangement, you build, you operate and transfer, or you do issue other kinds of concessions to the private sector. But I think we require participation in private sector. And I'm glad that you heard from Mr. Brian Molife that the 17 billion rand project, for instance, around the railway line, which includes us from Lothair to Swaziland and down to Richards Bay, will begin in March next year. And I'm glad that on the side of Mozambique, when we started, there's a road from Kosi Bay, Ponta de Oro to Maputo, which has now been given attention as a result of the East3ROUTE that will be under construction towards 2017 targets. And of course, I can safely say that when you look at the other areas of rail, even in between Swaziland, South Africa, up to Mozambique, so that we give our own people the various modes of transportations that allows them to move freely in between the countries and make this being so conducive. So clearly speaking, we think we then have moved on to say, through the East3ROUTE, some of the projects of the East3ROUTE is to identify infrastructural development projects that will go through the East3ROUTE, but some of those should be escalated to go to the north-south corridor that Ambassador Faisal Ismail spoke about earlier, which is led and championed by President Jacob Zuma. And we are very clear that those are the issues. But on the question of air connectivity and airlift, we're also saying we all have got international airports. And in part, we're now going to go together in terms of route development to attract airlines that can be able to fly through these countries so to increase your international arrival. It is in the area of infrastructure as well.
On that point, MEC, I want to bring in David, because we know that the Seychelles is trying to position itself as a regional aviation hub and one that can easily service the rest of the continent. Are you seeing the progress that the MEC speaks of in terms of the adoption of open sky policies in member countries? Are you finding that the cost of air travel is being addressed decisively so that when we talk about integration, even in the skies, it's something that is a low-hanging fruit for the Seychelles?
Well, absolutely. For the Seychelles, where we are in the middle of the Indian Ocean, air access is vital. It's very, very important for us. And at the same time, at the moment, we are in a very, very fortunate position where we have some major airlines serving our destination. So it is something very, very important for the East3ROUTE initiative for all the partners involved, because obviously when we put the program together and offer it to the potential visitors, we have to be able beforehand to create access to get to the countries. And air connectivity is key. For example, for us, as a strategy, we do not market where there are no air access linking to Seychelles. We ignore the market or maintain a very, very small presence. So it is definitely very, very important. And I think with us being together, then it makes it a lot easier to negotiate with our partners, for example, on their behalf.
I'm going to move on very quickly, David, just because of time, and I want to come to Minister Dlamini, because we're speaking about aviation. We know that there's a brand new international airport. And let's maybe learn from the South African experience, where the country has been criticized for very bullish investments around the infrastructure space. We're going back to 2010, we're going back to the stadia that had the public up in arms. What are you doing to make sure that you sweat that asset effectively so you're not sitting with the white elephant in Swaziland?
Thank you very much. Yes, the plan for the radius, about 5 to 10 kilometers radius around the airport is now being designed for development. Actually, the plan is almost concluded. We are developing industrial area there, hotels, offices, so that business, in terms of using the airport, is very conducive as well in terms of air travel. But as well, taking from what my colleague from Seychelles has said, I think it is important that as a block like the East3ROUTE, we become a good transport link mechanism so that this area is known for efficient transport. So it doesn't have to be one country over the other. I think if all of us provide these services and we can be an attraction and we can talk with one language across the rest of the world, maybe while still at that, I also would like to recognize the presence amongst us of the business people.
Right.
Because the business of government is to facilitate, it is to create an enabling environment and perhaps invest in infrastructure, et cetera, but we need the business to come on board. So I'm glad that they're here, but one area that perhaps business might want to take advantage of, it's actually operationalizing the facilitation level, which is currently done by the governments. So I'm yet to see a company, perhaps even a cross-border company that is established to take all these nice things that we're talking about here and make them happen and talk the business language, because companies are always there.
That's a business proposal right there. So if anybody's hungry for a business proposal, it's been put on the table.
We as ministers come and go, but business is always there and the business people are always there, so they need to get there and get into the field and play.
Get into the field and play. Minister Mabuza, let me come to you and ask a question that I think we really need to address quite decisively, because we're talking about infrastructure, but this conversation is bigger than tourism infrastructure. Let's talk about the other investment opportunities in other parts of infrastructure that can be realized off the back of this particular project. Is there anything in Swaziland that is of a big project nature that can also be leveraged off just because of this initiative?
Thank you. One of them, actually, on the infrastructure side, let me start there. I've already mentioned about the convention center that we are putting up. It is unfortunate that always when government puts up a building or a good initiative, some people will then criticize, like you have mentioned that maybe at the end of the day we will remain with a white elephant building, which of course that will not happen. Like in the case of the airport, the international airport that we have put up already, immediately when it started, the Emirates from Swaziland to Johannesburg, they had to change the flight and bring in a bigger flight than the one that used to move between these two countries. So that is a sign that actually it's bringing something to the country, which is very good anyway. And again, maybe to the point that you are raising, you will recall that Swaziland is a small country, but we normally say to people, if you get to Swaziland, another advantage, actually we even preach this to the private sector, to identify areas of tourism attraction centers. And then after you have identified those areas, then you come to government. You say, there is this area where I see a potential. And then as government, we are always ready to come and help the private sector on that side.
Johan, my fear in our conversations that we've had since the morning is that we might just be talking about big business. What about the small and medium-sized players? When we talk about investment, surely we're not only talking about foreign direct investment from foreign players that come with very deep pockets. Are you finding that where opportunities are mushrooming for local players, for entrepreneurs, that the financial support and the funding support that these players need to participate in the fruits of this initiative, that finance and that funding is coming to the fore?
I believe that it's happening slowly. And it was mentioned even before that the products that we take account is not only the investment opportunity conferences, is also to showcase the cultural and historical assets. We have also mentioned the cuisine element on that. When you take the East3ROUTE accommodation facilities in Mozambique, you will find that even the small and medium businesses are on it. The fellow colleagues and other delegates who are going to Mozambique, they will witness packages which are run by small companies.
It certainly sounds like the East3ROUTE initiative is open for big business as well as for small and medium-sized business. Having said that, now we're going to cross over to our audience, where we're going to be allowing our delegates to engage and interact with our panelists. That being said, please, when you would like to pose a question, kindly stand, introduce yourself by your name and organization, and please indicate to whom you'd like to pose your question, and then pose that question.
My name is Loco Roger from Mozambique. Actually, my question goes for my chairman from Mozambique. And the question is, how are tour operators in Mozambique prepared to absorb this opportunity, like to be able to sell or create packages that are going to attract tourists or to be sold abroad so that people can be attracted to visit Mozambique?
Thank you, sir. That's a question on tour operators. And then I think there was another hand on the side of the room before. It's right here in the fourth row, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Koza from Swaziland. Has anyone noticed that all the panelists are male? What does it say about the involvement across the board of all stakeholders, women, youth, and the whole human resource involvement, employment creation, part of the question? Thank you.
Koza, thank you so much. Good question there for women and young people. So let's maybe take on some of these questions that have been raised, and we'll take another round of questions in a moment. But Johan, I think there was a question that was directly put at your feet, and that is around tour operators and the ability or the support for them to take some of these opportunities that are ripe for the picking.
Thank you very much. To be honest, that question could be really 100% answered by the tour operators who are part of the Mozambique delegation. But we believe that they are well prepared, at least for this edition. In the case of 2014 editions, in Yamban we are working with a local tour operator. He's not from Maputo, he's from Yamban. And of course, we are also there to support if necessary. I do believe that you will never say that, okay, I'm 100% prepared, whether you are tour operators or civil servant. We will always have to improve yourself in order to gain the competitiveness. The other thing that I could say is that we have here the media. Help them to gain the ability, the skills to be prepared. As you showcase those initiatives, as you highlight how good and beautiful is this route, those tour operators will be also equipping themselves the same way that the public, the client, will believe that they may enjoy it. the preparation of the business sometimes depends on the number of clients that you get.
And then I don't know who's going to be brave enough to take on the women and youth question. So those who haven't answered, brace yourself.
It was not intentional that the panelists, all of them, should be males. In the South African situation, at least, we have a well-legislated quota system, particularly from the ruling party, that we have an inclusive approach when it comes to the issues of the role of women, both in the public sphere, but as well as in the private sphere. We just have passed in our own cabinet, as well as last week, Friday, we agreed in the Economic Council about a women's economic empowerment strategy, which details about how to do to empower women. I thought I should rather be able to make that point because the males here do not denote that we don't appreciate the role of women in the economy, and particularly in the region as well.
We've got less than 5 minutes, and I really want to give the audience another shot at questions before we take the final closing comments. Do we have a burning question that we can take in this final round? So there's gentlemen right here in the front and the gentleman on this side of the room. Let's take those two final questions. Let's make them concise, brief, and crisp, and then let's begin to wrap.
My question relates to the issue of corruption. Since we all agree that corruption is a global disease, are we going to see the 4 countries coming up with a joint efforts to fight corruption? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So Minister Mabuza, I'm going to put that at your feet. I'll choose you for Mduduzi. The question there is a question of corruption. And let's take the final question from the front, please.
What I'm asking is, Seychelles, it's about the fuel that you said you have been found around, fuel and gas that's around your area, offshore. What I'm interested on, Seychelles, is can you give us a promise as part of this 3ROUTE group that you are going to sell those fuel, because we suffer. We have already a lot of economy that is suffering within the region because of fuel purposes. Now, if within you, as part of this region, are you going to sell that fuel to us?
Richard, thank you for your question. David, you've been asked to make a promise. So let's start off with whether you're going to be able to keep that promise or not.
Well, very interesting question. First of all, we need to find the fuel first. The drilling is going to start, I think, in a couple of months.
Yeah.
First to identify and see it for real, and then we will start drilling. But, I mean, I cannot speak for CEPEC, that's the company which is in charge of the oil or Petro Seychelles. But I think such a relationship, such a partnership, obviously, will result in this happening, because Seychelles sees itself as part of Africa.
Richard, we will keep our eyes on him and we'll let you know if we get, once that gas comes to the fore. Minister Mabuza, I only put the question of corruption to you because the other questions have been taken, no insinuations whatsoever. What can this group of countries do as a collective to address the scourge of corruption?
Thank you. Let me start by saying in Swaziland we have a team that we call Anti-Corruption Commission. So they are always after whatever corruption that is taking place in the country. If they happen to get you, you are in jail. So I think, well, as it has been rightly mentioned, that it is a disease all over, but as long as we fight this disease, we will conquer it. And I hope everyone here, and even in the East3ROUTE, the whole team, we are against corruption at all costs. Actually, not only the East3ROUTE team, but I think even our countries are against that.
That's a good point to leave it. But let me get final closing comments, and each comment possibly 20 seconds or less. Let's talk just about the future of this initiative. David, from your perspective, what kind of conversation are you hoping that we will be having around Seychelles 1 year from now?
Well, first of all, we value our partnership with this initiative very, very much, because we feel that we'll be able to contribute and assist wherever possible, and we certainly think that it would be a very valuable thing for Seychelles in the future.
Johan, let's get a quick comment from you in particular. How are we going to make sure that the benefits from tourism in particular trickle down to the broader economy? It's been one of the biggest criticisms that we've seen, where the ordinary population is not always reaping the benefits. How do we move forward?
Well, I think that it will happen through the commitment from civil servants, from the private sectors, who are already aware that the East3ROUTE initiative is a good initiative. And I will add this on what was raised, the promises of gas and so on. We may make sure that those discoveries may impact positively on the initiatives like this. And actually there is examples. When you take Mozambican case, we supply power from Tete to South Africa. We supply gas to South Africa from Inyamban. So the promise is very easy to fulfill it.
So the promise is easy to fulfill.
Supplying gas from Palma. I do believe that this initiative can only work.
This initiative can only work. Minister Dlamini, let's perhaps just get a quick comment from you in terms of the key messages that you would like to share with the investment community, really to reinforce that this is not just a clustering of neighboring countries, but this is a formidable player that should be on every investor's list.
Thank you very much. My key message really will be about the sustainability of the initiatives that we talk about, especially in terms of creating an institutional framework that will follow up on the programs, on the promises that we make, and on the promises that combine all the governments. Like I've mentioned earlier, that we also in Swaziland have established the investor roadmap, amongst which is the issue of cross-border trade. You correctly mentioned that perhaps we talk about business and big businesses, and there's the issue of the small, including informal traders, who cross through our borders, and the stories, the experiences that they tell are not very palatable. And I would like to suggest that through this initiative, maybe all the stakeholders that are involved, we quickly come together amongst the things that we need to solve. And like one of the audience members mentioned, that what is being done for women and youth. And we are really targeted, because most of the cross-border trade informally is largely women. And so my plea, again, my commitment is that we'll work with colleagues and partners to ensure that the cross-border trading is a pleasant experience, especially for our women who travel across these borders.
Minister Mabuza, let's talk about the outlook for tourism, in particular in your country and for this particular region. Again, 1 year from now, what do you think the conversation should have evolved into?
Thank you. Actually, as we have already mentioned, that this initiative is a very good one. And we are a small country in Swaziland, a country of 1.2 population, the population of the country. But I want to tell you that we are also getting tourists of almost the same number. So our dream is to increase that number to a bigger number, maybe double that number.
Thank you so much. But MEC, let's give you the final closing remark on this. We've heard earlier that under no unequivocal terms that the brand stays what it is. It is the East3ROUTE. This does not, however, undermine the integration of the Seychelles. But let's talk about future growth. What about countries like Madagascar? What about other potential big tourism players that could really bolster this initiative? Is that on the cards at all? And can you tell me who you're thinking about?
I want to say the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. And you should be very careful if you are an individual in whatever trade you are, not to bite more than you can chew. And I think for now, as the East3ROUTE member countries, we just want to bite in sizable chunks. Hence, we have no appetite to grow faster than we can handle. And for me, in the next going forward, what is it about that is going to be important? The first thing is what I think Hussein Dlamini referred to as smart partnerships. We need to have smart partnerships. Those smart partnerships have to bolster a few things. I think the first one is the question of industrialization and developing a developmental integrated model for the region, but starting on a small scale with the 3-4 countries participating, that focuses on growing industrial development, that focuses on market integration, that promotes tourism, but also goes beyond tourism and dealing with issues of trade and cross-border trade, issues of infrastructure development, and lastly, focusing on improving the quality of life of ordinary citizens who are member states of the East3ROUTE. Because without improving the quality of life of those ordinary citizens, this lofty ideal shall remain nothing but a club of the elite, and it will not succeed.
On that note, the MEC has reminded us about the central and the core values to the East3 initiative. Let this not become another grouping of elite players who are reaping the benefits of a very lucrative sector. The panelists have called for integration. The panelists have called for an acceleration into infrastructure development. But most importantly, the panelists have also called on the private sector to come to the party and play in this rather potentially lucrative investment area that is the East3ROUTE initiative. On that note, thank you for making the time to join us. From myself, Nozipho Mbanjwa, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.